Welcome to another episode of Court Matters with Sandy Hill and Wendy Ledger. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Hi, Sandy. I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. So we're going to tackle a very, very interesting subject today. Lots of people I find have questions around this, and they seem to be overwhelmed by it, and it is legal aid. So shall we just dive straight in to talking about legal aid?
I think we should, because there's a lot to talk about, isn't there, really?
Yes,
quite
there
a big
is.
subject and a very important one.
Yeah. What have your experiences, before we get into looking at the law and what specifically legal aid is and who can apply? We've got tons of, talking points this evening. Let's talk a little bit about how important legal aid is. I mean, you've sat in court and you've seen people have access to legal aid. Sometimes people perhaps didn't have access to legal aid, so they want to represent themselves. How important do you think legal aid is to making the system work?
Oh, it's really important. I think, obviously, to the criminal aspect of the courts, it's really fundamental, really, really fundamental. And there's a lot of arguments at the moment that we're not funding it enough on the other side of as well, in terms of civil and family law. And obviously there are arguments that, yes, we definitely need to put more money into that side of things, as well as the place becomes more, as more strangers interact with each other, if you like, you're more likely to get situations where litigation is required. And I think, so we now see ourselves in situations, you see them a lot, like civil cases appearing that obviously the small man in the street needs to defend himself in some way, shape or form, but he doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal to do it. And so legal aid needs to, and certainly for families, I think here in Cayman especially, where we have very complex divorces, because often one party, or even sometimes both parties, come from entirely different places. So you have, these difficulties with child custody battles and things like that, where again, people need some support. But certainly when it comes to criminal law, without legal aid, it's impossible. How can you, represent yourself when you don't have a clue with the power of the state, or getting a sort of a rubbish, like a really bad lawyer or whatever, because you can't afford to get anybody else other than the person that failed their law degree. It's, your life can be at stake. And I think what's interesting about it is, I think it has evolved in the culture, even here to a certain extent. There used to be a time when people were very down on legal aid, like, why are we funding it? Why for all this money, millions of dollars go to legal aid every year? And people have begun to realize how important it is to everyone, because it can happen to you. And I think, interestingly enough, one of the proponents of cutting legal aid back in the sort of 2010s was our old friend McKeever Bush. Every year he used to come when the legal aid line item came up on the budget. Mr. Bush would be quick to say, why are we doing this? And he would want to cut it. And he tried on a number of occasions to cut it. And then lo and behold, a few years later, he himself began his own legal battles, which, was still occurring right up until last week. And he himself has been funded by legal aid, and rightly so. One of the cases, he was charged with rape, and that's, close anywhere up to life imprisonment. So of course you need to have, and he got, and what's interesting is, and everyone can as well, he got access to very, very good attorneys through the legal aid system. And that is the same across the board here. There is this idea that if you're rich and you can afford a lawyer, you can get a great lawyer. Whereas if you're on legal aid, you're going to get a shitty lawyer. That's really not the case here at all. It really isn't. We have some great legal aid lawyers living and working in the Cayman Islands. And then those KCs that they go on to, to instruct for the cases. Some of them are absolutely brilliant. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact that these guys really don't mind coming here, because the cases are interesting. It's interesting to work in a jurisdiction like this for them. It's great for their resumes. And they get to stay on 7 Mile Beach whilst they're here. So, and they don't mind. It might only be, I think it's $165 an hour these days, or whatever, legal aid rate for those guys. And of course, those guys can command, $1,000 an hour normally, but they're willing to do it because of all the other things that come with it. And so we get some really good lawyers here, really good. I've seen been privileged to watch some incredible performances in the courtroom from some great guys, all funded by legal aid. It's one of the line items on the budget I don't mind seeing. And this year, the budget allocated, I think it's just under 3 million for next year, and just over 3 million for 2027, which is still, it's not a big bill.
Yeah, and I must say, I mean, we can talk about perhaps a bit later on if there's any improvements to be had in the legal aid system. But as someone who has benefited from it, you know, I can personally attest to what you've said as well. And I mean, there's some cases, for example, with my last case, as the Court of Appeal rightfully said, the constitutional aspect of that case being so important to not just myself, but the entire community, they really said that legal aid is something that should be granted. And so they kind of gave some really special instructions in terms of that. But yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, I just say rightly so, because it's important.
Yeah. So, you know, and I'll be honest, you know, I've also been one to in the past criticize legal aid. Like, you think, well, why is this person getting legal aid? But when you've had the benefit of it, you can see why. You know, when it's involving a criminal case, your freedom's at stake. It's something that is really, really essential to have available. And you don't always know someone's financial situation. I mean, you can look at someone and think they have money, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they also may have a lot of bills. So you can't, you know, they've got
an expensive house. And more importantly, the problem with, if you don't have legal aid, even if you have money, you won't have it for much longer once you start. You know, if you're running a big case, be it you're charged from anything from murder to if it's a big civil case, even if you start off rich, believe me, it's the fastest way to poverty is going through the courts.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you know, good lawyers do not come at a discounted rate normally. So. No. Yeah, absolutely.
And yet they do under legal aid. So it's an interesting dichotomy in a situation, where you get that, where you can get a great lawyer at a bargain basement price and you're not even paying for it. So it's a win-win for everyone, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some of the logistics, if we can, of what legal aid is. So maybe there's some people already tuned in who are wondering, well, what exactly is legal aid? So how about if we start off with sort of a basic definition? You know, the thing that we always make sure that we refer to is the law. So we should put this disclaimer in here at the beginning of every single show. We're not lawyers. Wendy obviously is from Cayman News Service. I'm here on the CMR side. You know, Wendy has a lot more experience than I do sitting in very complex trials. So she's seen a lot. She knows and understands a lot about the legal system, but we're not attorneys. And like that commercial says, oh, I stayed at such and such a hotel last night, so I feel like I'm a lawyer today. No, we're not even going to do that. We're just here to give you some common sense advice. And if you find yourself in a predicament, the advice that we would always give you is to get yourself a good, proper lawyer. So, you know, the objective of this show is to talk about court matters, all sorts of things related to the court, but hopefully to also give you some insight in how you can get help when you need it. So, you know, the legislation is there. There is a Legal Aid Act. It's 2015 revision. This version, it says the legal aid law, but it should actually say legal aid acts. I think this just hasn't been updated on the website. But, you know, this will give you some guidance, and this will sort of be the Bible, if you will, that is going to govern all of the aspects of, you know, what you need to know, and if your lawyer is assisting you, what they should know in terms of the actual legal aid process. So let's start out with a basic definition. And of course, you know, the great thing about all the legislation that's out there, they always have what's called a definition section. And so they really, really get to the point, like, what is an applicant? What's an assigned attorney? So sometimes it's good to understand these very, very basic elements of it. But from the perspective of just, you know, making it as simple as possible, legal aid in the Cayman Islands is actually a publicly funded scheme that helps people who cannot afford a lawyer to get representation or advice in certain criminal and civil matters. There's also other things out there that we can talk about, Wendy, including some community-based free legal aid clinics that are available to people as well, because I think those are wonderful resources that can help people.
Great starting points.
Yes. So when we talk about, and I think this is something that's important, and it's a distinction to be made in the Cayman Islands law, that there is an element of the law itself that, as we said, someone who cannot afford a lawyer. And I even heard the judges in my case, when they were questioning the legal aid director, say, right, Cayman law has this unique element to it where there is a financial means test. Mm-hmm. And that is the basis upon which you get legal aid. Any thoughts, Wendy, on the financial means test, and if that is something that should be changed for certain types of cases? Because I got the distinct impression when the judges were speaking to her, they basically said, regardless of what Sandra Hill's financial means are, this is such an important case that we would think that this would be eligible for legal aid regardless, right? Yeah. It's almost as though that they were instructing her that there was a much more important overriding constitutional component to this case as opposed to it just being a strict financial means test.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the means testing to a certain extent has more impact usually in terms of people applying for legal aid for civil matters. But it can have an impact on criminal. And I think therein lies the problem. It can either be, if there's as you pointed out, where there's a constitutional case and where the Crown has come after you for something that you are innocent of, and there's also an important legal point to be made, there's an argument that it wouldn't matter how rich you were. And also there are very few people, even in Cayman, there are very few people that are in a position financially that can pay a full legal bill. And therefore means testing, especially in criminal cases, it can be very problematic because it can wipe a person clean. And so you may start off with a spare million, but that million will not last too long if you yourself are paying for a lawyer, because the thing about the legal aid is, like I said earlier, it has these parameters around it. Like the lawyers are paid a certain amount, whereas in the free market economy, a lawyer can charge you $1,000, $2,000 an hour. And so, the bill can run away from you in the private sector. If you're not on legal aid, the bill can run away from you before you've even got to the morning of the trial.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because one thing about lawyers is they certainly have a unique way of billing, and they, rightfully or wrongfully, they nickel and dime you in every little thing. So it's not just the time in court, but it's preparation, pre-trial preparation. It's, they make a phone call to you, that's billable. They photocopy a document, that's billable.
Yes. Everything, absolutely everything. Yeah. And therein lies the problem. Whereas with the legal aid, they no matter who they are, no matter how great they are, there is a cap. And as I said, I can't remember the exact amount at the moment. I'm sure it's somewhere in the law, but I think at the moment it's about $165 an hour, which is, as we said, that's a minuscule amount compared to what lawyers can normally earn. But we have the fortunate access to great lawyers even at that rate.
Absolutely.
So yes, you're right. I mean, we need to look at there's nothing, when you're talking about a billionaire in a legal dispute with another billionaire, then no, legal aid shouldn't be even touching the corners, that shouldn't be. But if there's a billionaire, for example, a really good example goes back a long time now, but the West Bay Road debate, it took the ladies a long, long time to get any money for that fight against a millionaire. And you have, and the government. So you have the power of the state, you have the power of people with a lot of money. And then you have little people who have concerns about the broader public impact these things can have. And it's very hard. It was very hard for them to access legal aid. And the same fight is going on for the same group of women over similar things, which are still tied to that agreement, which is now the beach access points. And I think we would all agree that the people of Cayman would like to see these legal issues over beach access points ironed out. So that should be all paid for by legal aid. It shouldn't be a bunch of retired ladies on fixed income subbing it, because what happens with civil often is that you might have to pay part of it. So if it's costed out, it's taxed at a certain level or whatever, and the costs come out, you might still have to, and the whole thing comes to $50,000. You might still have to pay 20% of that. which
Yes.
is a lot of money if you're on a fixed income.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yes, I think there's a lot of room for us to increase the access to legal aid and to increase the funding. Personally, when you look at the amount of money that's in the budget this year, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you had the joy this year, Sandra, following the budget. There was a lot of very, very pricey line items for things that you'd think, really? And yet legal aid, I don't think it's a lot for like 3 million each year. It's basically around 6 million for the next 2 years. That's not a lot of money. Not for one of the most important things, which is helping your people fight the power of the law and the state.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, it really comes down to, as you rightfully said, your very life, your freedom might be at stake, which can impact your family, that can impact your livelihood, your ability to, have employment. If you're sent off to jail, obviously that's your entire life right there that will be impacted for the foreseeable future. So it really is an important portion of what happens in the judiciary, and a lot of people find
it's a cornerstone of democracy, really, to be able to allow people to fight in a court, be it criminal or otherwise, fairly. And how do you have parity of arms? The only way you can have parity of arms is if you can get to legal aid, because how many people who are charged with serious criminal offenses, I mean, it's less of an issue, I suppose, now, but more often than not, the Crown will instruct its own KC. I mean, we used to have Cheryl, who is a KC. So she was capable of actually prosecuting an awful lot, and she did prosecute an awful lot of cases on behalf of the Crown. We currently have a director of public prosecutions who has never, ever litigated anything in a courtroom here in the years that he's been here. I think the only time I saw him in the court was for your case, I think. And that was when he thought he wasn't actually going to have to do any standing up and talking. I think he may have been in also on one of Keith Meyer's appeals, like in that one as well. But I mean, this is so now every single murder stroke major criminal case, they are instructing lawyers from the UK.
Yeah. And do we know on the opposite side of legal aid, do we know what the DPP's office budget is, like what they're spending in all these cases? I don't know if
and it's quite hard to find out because they're very reluctant. Because often, depending on what the case is, I mean, obviously the criminal case, I think an FOI we could probably FOI most cases and get an average. I don't think it's dissimilar to legal aid from what I understand, but I don't want to put my neck on that. We don't know. There isn't, it's not listed anywhere. It's not freely available. It's something that you have to get on an FOI. It's obviously comparable. I mean, they wouldn't be able to get away with it otherwise. So you can assume that.
Right.
But they shouldn't have to. They should have the DPP should be
competent enough
to be a litigating prosecutor, because that's it's a big chunk of the job. And Cheryl just did it before she became a judge very competently for years.
All right. So let's talk about how you go about actually getting legal aid, because I think that this is important. So we've talked a little bit that, if you find yourself facing criminal charges. Now, is it all criminal charges, Wendy? Let's talk about the merits test, which we'll get to when it comes to civil cases. But as it relates to criminal cases, is there a comparison if you're in summary court versus grand court?
Yes, you're not every single crime. I think it's largely based on the list. I think is on. You'll see it's in the law. If you bring up the law, you should be able to see what crimes it covers. But effectively, if you're not likely to go to jail, then you're less likely to get legal aid. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't. I think it's very it's very much on a case by case basis.
Yeah. So that's obviously critical and important to recognize.
Hence on the website as well, on the legal aid pages, which I think we're going to bring that up. You'll see the criminal aid application form there, which it's pretty straightforward, and you can select your own attorney, so you can get a local attorney, and then another really important document on the same page is the list of current legal lawyers that are practicing that are willing to do legal aid work for criminal defense.
Yes,
which is a really important
list.
So
let me just bring that one up, because I think that's actually a really important list, because a lot of times,
very important list.
Yeah, we have people asking, well, how do I know if this lawyer is going to accept legal aid? Well, it's basically all available on the website. They've just updated it as of last month, so they do update it on sort of a fairly regular basis.
So as lawyers move, because we've had an awful lot of attorneys, as I'm sure you're aware, departing recently from the DPP's office.
Yes.
And a lot of them have gone into private practice, and they've been added to the list. So even the latest one, which is, some of the best lawyers from the DPP's office now have gone across to the defense side, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I think we know why, but
I must say that I was a bit surprised to see Greg Welcome, not to call him up by name, but yes, he is now over on the other side. And he was working with the DPP's office for a number of years. So that's interesting, because you feel like they know a little bit of
Candida James Malcolm as well. That's another one. Very surprising that she.
Which one was that, Wendy?
Candida James Malcolm. She was deputy.
Is she now?
Yep, she's gone. She's gone, and she's on the criminal defense side.
Wait a minute. I think
she's on the list. Yeah, she's there now. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah. There's been a long list of departures.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, all's not well, as they say in the DPP's office these days. But all the better for the legal aid defense attorney list, because there's
absolutely
some really good lawyers on there now. And I tell you, having a former prosecutor as a defense attorney is helpful.
It's absolutely, because they know a lot about what happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. So, let me just mention that the website is really, really, I'm going to put the link here so that people can see it scrolling at the bottom of their screens, but check it out. It has a lot of information. The application, for example, is on the website, this list of attorneys that we just showed you, and some guidance notes as well on how to apply and what would make an application be sort of like a proper application, if you will. So these are some of the things that you want to ensure that you are keeping an eye out on, right? So that's the website with the legal aid details. And I must do a congratulations to the judiciary. They've recently redone their, their website, and they've added quite a bit of additional information.
Yes.
That is very, very helpful to members of the public, as well as, even media. So
I think we're planning on a show where we're going to talk about the website and what's on it.
Yes. Yeah. Good.
I would say already it's improved immensely. It's, the amount of information that's available on it now. And like now, as we're saying about this legal aid, all of the legal aid, the laws there, how you can get it, when you can get it, under what circumstances, all of the forms that you can either print off and fill at your own leisure, or I think some of them you can even fill in online. For lots of things. There's a lot of information on the website now, and the legal aid section is pretty comprehensive. I thought it covers pretty much what you need. I think what's interesting about the legal aid and why it was worth doing a show on it is because of that culture that's evolving in Cayman, where people are really beginning to appreciate how essential these tools are that government pays for, because it's just. It would be unimaginable. Can you imagine? I mean, because we're going to have to talk about you in this show particularly. Yeah. Because could you imagine? I mean, you can share with us some of the experiences that you've had over the years since they first started on you with that tiny little dog way back in 19 blob, when you were the first case against you, and they seemed to get their back up because you pointed out to them as they tried to arrest you that it were, there wasn't a law. And I think your experience yourself, because whilst there's an argument to be had, I don't know that maybe they genuinely believe that you're committing crimes. But having observed this from the beginning and being in the courtroom for the first case with the little dog, right the way up to, I think you're back in court on Friday, I believe, that, you know, that you've got to question, are they being fair, or is this perhaps a bit of a witch hunt? I don't know. I mean, who am I to say, Sandra?
Yeah. No, I mean,
so
you know, I often
tell us your own experience with legal aid and how you found it, especially over the years, because I'm sure it's changed.
Right. No, definitely. When I first, I would say before that first case, which was back in, I think it was 2009, 2010, I definitely had a very different perspective of people applying and getting legal aid. Like, I was one of those people who questioned, like, well, why would this person get legal aid? But when you're in the position where, you know, you might be working for a salary, but I know I didn't steal that dog. I didn't do anything wrong. So why must I go out and find a retainer fee of $5,000 to $10,000, $15,000 to hire an attorney, 100%. And then, you know, hope that they get me off? And then who's going to reimburse me? Nobody's going to reimburse you for that. There's no costs that are given in criminal cases, right?
No.
So you defend yourself and you spend all of this money knowing that you didn't do this, what's alleged to begin with. It's very, very frustrating. So one of the reasons why that first case I handled it myself isn't because I think I'm some stellar, you know, law student who, you know, was moonlighting as a lawyer. It's just because the financial means just wasn't there to go and retain an attorney. And the other thing that I have found, unfortunately, is sometimes it's difficult to not just find an attorney from a financial perspective, but for other reasons, they might be conflicted. You know, or they can't handle a case. So, you know, even having that list of attorneys readily available on the website that you can reach out to and say, hey, you know, I understand that you'll accept legal aid. Will you help me, assist me with this? You have no idea how much legal fees are. I mean, it's ridiculous. On the civil side, you know, I've seen bills for like $5,000-$6,000 just to basically write somebody a letter. And have basic correspondence. So it can quickly add up. And so, you know, I did the first one myself. I think I did the second case myself as well. Maybe I won like the first 2 or 3 cases. And then I really started to get fatigue. Like, there's an emotional element to all of this, especially when it's yourself. So yes, I might have some understanding of the law. Like I said, I'm not a qualified attorney. I'm certainly no expert. But it was still fatiguing. It was like, okay, this is my life that I'm fighting for. And sometimes it is infinitely better to have, not sometimes, probably in most instances, it is infinitely better to have an attorney do all the legwork for you. Yes, you can obviously meet with your attorney regularly and sort of guide them on what you want your defense to look like, but to really give them the reins. And there are things that they will have access to, including colleagues for feedback. And to get, you know, like you said, if they need to bring in a KC, as with my last case, that was available. And we brought in a gentleman who, I can tell you, he wrote his responding, you know, points. And by the time they received that afternoon, the DPP's office conceded almost immediately upon seeing what points he brought to the table. So, you know, you need to have the right team, the right legal team, certainly, and the right attorneys on your side. And that comes, you know, at a price. And lawyers know how to work the system. They know how to get additional help if needed. They know how to do research. There's a lot of elements that really go into it. So I wouldn't recommend that most people try to do this, have a go at this on their own. I think legal aid now, I have to accept that this is an essential part of the system for it to work effectively.
Yep. And as a jurisdiction like ours, as we grow as a jurisdiction, that I feel quite strongly that it compounds that issue, because we become, you know, more and more apart from each other, if you see what I mean. Like, you know, there's more and more distance, and especially on the civil side, I think, you know, we really need to look at that, because at the moment it is a very discretionary area. Like, and, you know, people have to apply and reapply and fight and battle to get, but I really feel, especially now that we have a constitution, that we need to find another $1 million a year, to be honest, purely just for civil cases, to enable people. And I think, you know, we in the press, I mean, I have to say, it's probably changed. And I don't know how you find this now. But in the early days when Nikki and I first started, we were getting threats of lawsuits almost on a weekly basis. And I mean, at first we were kind of a bit, it's a bit itchy, and we kind of take things down that we knew were truthful and we knew that they were right, but we just didn't have the money to fight these things, and we didn't really. And then I think it was after a while we began to think, no, this is ridiculous. People can't be bullying us. So we started standing up for ourselves, and we didn't use lawyers because obviously we didn't have the money to do it. And in a lot of cases, what we did was we took templates of letters. And so we would respond to lawyers with these template letters that we'd found on other legal sites that help journalists. If you do a bit of research, you'll see where people are trying to sue you for perfectly legitimate stories and things like that, because that's the problem is the truth doesn't save you from a gazillion dollar legal bill if you have to go to court. I mean, yeah, in the end you might be right, but what good is that if you've gone bankrupt in the process? Yeah. So, it's important that you know how to navigate these things. But in the end, anything to do with freedom of speech, anything to do with the kind of issues that you've had to deal with, they and the kind of things that the West Bay Road ladies were fighting for. These are things that should be automatically legally aided funded. And I think there's a lot of constitutional areas where, for example, Chantel and Vicky, their case, I'm not sure whether they did get that. I don't know whether it was legally aided in the end, but I know it wasn't all. And I know they spent money on lawyers. And in the end, we got that civil partnership law. So I don't think they should have had to pay for anything. It's the same kind of thing, things that are constitutional. People should, the one man should not, for something that's going to end up benefiting a much bigger section of society, should not be funded out of the pockets of one person or one small group of people.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about the real life impact, there's a case that just came to mind that I'll kind of throw up here now. Of course, most people remember this millionaire guy who sued me for defamation. And, it was so funny because when
the gun case.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember how, you did a story on it as well, where you went to the police and said, hey, we've got a lot of questions surrounding how this went down and what happened. And sometimes they're suing you over very minute and minuscule things. But over 5 years ago, when I was dealing with this case, I actually did an editorial piece called Law and Privilege, Money Can't Impact Justice. If people have any time on their hands, perhaps they could go back and have a read of this. But it became really, really clear that this guy had a lot of money at his disposal. And he was trying to prove a point. He was trying to make an example of me and to prove a point, and sending a much broader, I think, message to media here in the Cayman Islands that you can't write a story about someone where you're questioning these things. And literally the issue that he had in the original story was a quote where someone was saying, this doesn't pass the smell test. It smells and feels like something is off here. Where did the gun go? How was he arrested and then let go? Like, it didn't really pass the smell test. And so as a result of it not passing the smell test, there was a lot of subsequent questions. So there's like a quote in there which said, this feels like corruption of some sort. Mind you, it didn't actually say that he was the corrupt individual or that it had anything to do with him, but he really filed it based on, there's an implication here that he had done something wrong. And so that was always his foundational message, is that whether the police charge him or not isn't a matter of to do anything with him, but he didn't do anything wrong. And the article didn't explicitly said that he did, but yet they can file a lawsuit when it comes to defamation in particular. The judges, out of just, an abundance of precaution, they're going to have you take the lawsuit down, and then the ball starts rolling. And it really, really snowballs when when a person has a lot of resources on the one hand and the other person doesn't. Because they can have you in court every single week. They can file all sorts of crazy papers against you, and you're trying to figure things out, right? So it matters. Having access to legal aid really, really does matter. Now, there is a really helpful checklist that is available on the website. And we should say that because this is a means test specifically, the application is going to ask you about information about your income, your savings, your assets, what your spouse or partner has in terms of income, what dependents you have. rent and mortgages and other expenses to really try to assess your ability to pay.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have to be open to submitting a lot of financial information. If you own property, you've got to put like the block and parcel number and all this stuff on there so that the director of legal aid can make a determination about whether or not you qualify for legal aid.
If you're hiding billions, then it's not fair. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you are a multi-millionaire or a billionaire, then even if you're charged with murder, I mean, it's not fair. But at the end of the day, because you're capable, and it's not going to bankrupt you. But anybody, and remember, they can't. It's not based on your home. Your home can't be touched by the courts.
Yes.
That's like that's your home. So the fact that your home might be worth $5 million because you bought it years and you got it from given to you by your grandmother who bought it years and years ago, and all of those kind of things. So they're not going to base it on the value of your home or anything like that, because they know that isn't a tangible asset. It's not something you can access. But if you've got 50 million in the bank, you're not going to get a full legal aid grant. It's not going to happen, and rightly so, because the budget is relative. Well, I think it is, especially for a population of 100,000 people. I think $3 million a year is quite small.
Yep, absolutely. And so another note that we should just throw in here in terms of the civil cases, there is another test that is applied, and that one is reasonable prospects of success. In other words, how likely is it that you're actually going to win your case? So if you have a civil case that unfortunately, you don't have a chance in hell of winning, you're not going to get legal aid for it, because legal aid isn't in the business of just throwing money at cases just for the sake of doing so. Have you ever seen a case where legal aid was denied based on this specific? I was just trying to recollect there, but
I've had nobody come to me, and I've not seen any cases, because I think it's worked. That sort of gatekeeping, because it is a gatekeeping situation in that one. Because otherwise, so like I say, some people use the law, and certainly defamation and things like that, as a bullying tactic to shut people up. So whether that's you or me or just generally people on social media these days, they go after, people went after, developers have gone after people that were, talking about environmental campaigns on their websites, and developers went after them for chatting on social media about their concerns about development, which is terrible. And then you end up, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen. So yes, it's important that if you're filing a civil claim against somebody for doing something that you feel has hurt you in some way, shape, or form, that has to be genuine, because otherwise people would do it constantly to try and shut people up constantly. It would, so it's important. So the only people that can do that now, that can go after people that don't have money, are those that have deep pockets. And it happens, and we've seen it happen. And then the victim has also got to get access to legal aid. And there was that circumstance that I'm thinking about in particular. It was one person I know who had said some things about a developer, and that developer went after her, and she couldn't get legal aid to defend herself. And that was really unfair, because all she had done was expressed her concerns about legitimate concerns about development.
Yes, absolutely. So there is a checklist here on the website that is extremely useful as you try to go through the application process. So for example, you do obviously need the application form. Then they're going to need some things that fall under the, proof identification, driver's license, passport, and so on. Some of the court documents that will be needed to go with the application, proof of income. So this again is where they get into details about your salary, your wages, any rental income, any maintenance that you may be making. And then of course, on the other side of that, if you have any donations that are coming in for your defense
legal fund.
All of that. And there was a case some months back where that became a point of contention, and that was the constitutional case with Katina Anglin, where she actually has an NPO set up, and she was receiving funding. So that that is something that if you have funds in an account, you have to be willing, and you said, I'm raising money for this, you have got to be willing to to ensure that you put that towards it, and the court will look at these things. Yeah. So that was quite a critical decision in terms of that. And then any of your expenses and liabilities that you have on the other side of the equation as well, you've got to provide that information. So it's a very useful, it's only a few pages, 4 pages long, but it's a very, very useful bit of information that you should provide to the court. And they're more than, happy to.
And I would say to people as well, I know a lot of people in Cayman don't like to divulge their private business and tell the authorities how much they earn or what their house is worth or all of these things. And I know it can be painful, but let me tell you, if you're facing a legal situation, do it, because if you're in a criminal situation, you're going to get the money if you fill these forms. If you don't fill the forms in, you're not going to get a cent. So do it, because it's going to be worth it, and you'll regret it if you don't. And even for civil too, because I think there are a lot of civil cases that don't make it, that should have made it onto because they're important in the same sort of realm as some of the things that you've talked about that are important cases. So, for example, like the Katina one was the other side of the coin of the Chantal Day and Vicky Bodden case. And she had a perfect right to do that. I just because I didn't agree with her, it doesn't mean to say that it wasn't a constitutional question that she was asking that was valid to be asked. So it's important that even if you're doing a civil case, and it might be something like the beach access cases that we're seeing going through, these are fundamental people's issues. And we don't really have many institutions yet in Cayman that are capable of doing it. And I think one of the areas that we may see that where I think we were going to have to look at legal aid and injecting another whole separate pile of money for it is environmental issues. Because we are going to have to start taking government or people to court to protect our environment, because we don't have, there just aren't the mechanisms in place anywhere at the moment to protect our environment. It's so, even where we have the law, it is not being followed by anyone, including the government. So I think those kind of areas are critical, and it's beginning to happen in other countries where you're beginning to see people take and succeed in the courts. And this is going to be important for the next generation. And I think that's where we're going to, I keep arguing that we desperately need some proper chapters here of established environmental groups. I think maybe Extinction Rebellion might just be a little bit too much for people to cope with here. But I think, things like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth need to establish chapters here with local people so that they can begin to do this lobbying for funding for environmental cases, because we're going to see more and more of them come up.
Yeah.
To get legal aid.
Yes. And I just want to point out this pretty important section here of Legal Aid Act, where it talks about the scope of what they will cover. So they do have, for example, some family law proceedings, where it has to do with the residence of a child, contact with a child, anything with children.
Important here because as we said earlier about there's so many couples that are from different countries, and that makes it so challenging.
Yes. Yep. Adoption of children, affiliation of children. So children being very, very critical to any case will give you an upper hand when it comes to applying for legal aid. And then it also has under subsection 5, Wendy, the areas where legal aid will not be granted. So defamation. So too bad for us.
But it has been. So it's interesting that's up there, but there is room for legal aid defamation cases, and I understand that it has been granted before. I mean, as it goes, we didn't actually. We've only ever had one that made it to the courtroom door, and we funded it by raising. We had the old Auditor General from years ago put. Establish a fund for us, and he managed it and distributed it and used it, and we used it up until the point where we needed it. But I think I understand from others that there have been cases in the past where defamation was covered, and the fact that it isn't in the law needs to be addressed. And I think that's something that legal drafters have been looking at.
Right. Yeah, because it specifically excludes it. I mean, it says, that it's excluded. So that's quite interesting.
And it's interesting. It doesn't exclude environmental issues because they probably never thought of that when they originally wrote the law.
Yeah.
So, but I think now they have to consider including these things.
Yeah. The other one that I found quite interesting and maybe a little bit controversial is proceedings relating to any election, because I would have thought that, again, that could potentially be a constitutional challenge, a constitutional issue. So
I think it's because it's treated so separately, like the election law and of all of its own kind of, its own ring-fenced kind of issues as to how you bring a legal case in election laws, and it's very tight. And so I think it's perhaps seen as like it might be a little bit too much for people to stomach if politicians were getting legal aid over their individual fights. Although, if it was constituents that were raising it, again, maybe that's a different area. Like you say, if it's a constitutional issue, if somebody's running and they've been elected and it turns out that they were elected unconstitutionally, should the public be allowed to take a legal action and then get that funded by government? I suppose it's a tad difficult, isn't it? I'm not surprised that that's pushed off, but I think we've got to look at things like defamation and environmental battles as being things that should be funded. It should. Like I say, I think there are ways around the law as to how people have manipulated it to get legal aid to help them in those circumstances. But I think we need to make it clear. There will be a lot more cases coming up, and legal aid needs to. I think we just need to fund a lot more. Yeah.
All right. So there are some additional, qualifications here that is actually explained in the law. For example, any parties in civil proceedings or civil appeals, including legal guardians, guardian ad litem, or persons who have the power of attorney to act on behalf of children or persons under a physical or mental disability. So again, certain categories.
Very, very important.
Yeah. But as Wendy said, the law is a little bit dated. So the expansion of some of the categories and perhaps even reviewing what categories are expressly excluded should be something that could be looked at for future revision.
Yeah, I think there is some, I seem to recall that the Legal Aid Drafting Department has been circulated a document some time ago about modernizing some elements of the legal aid law. Because what's that one is that 2017, that one?
This is the law. This is 2015 revision.
2015. So it's a decade old.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
probably needs.
So yes. And we're gonna have to do a part 2 to this particular area of discussion, Wendy, because believe it or not, our hour's almost up. We have about 10 minutes left. I know we've barely touched on some of the stuff, but I think there's a real question about whether or not the legal aid system should even stay intact as it is, or is there some room for kind of like the American system where you have like how you have the DPP's office, you have an office of attorneys that provide defense services, and you fund that as like a government department. But we're not going to get into that until part 2. But we'll have a chat around whether or not that's a better system as opposed to what we currently have. Maybe
my
not.
My instinct is that it's not.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say that should the legal aid department become more independent from the courts. That's another question. I mean, the legal aid department itself could be, or legal aid as an entity could be a separate government department. I wouldn't object to that, but I think the idea of how the American system works and how those attorneys are paid, because it's so badly paid, and whereas we maintain a certain kudos, I think, and a certain quality of, because they're not public defenders only. So, for example, that list that we brought up of those 30 odd, how many is it? It's about 35 attorneys is all, I think. I mean, we definitely need more. That's another thing. We need more attorneys that are willing to practice on legal aid basis. But those most of those people, they do all sorts of work. They don't just do public criminal defending. They also do private work, and they also do civil work, and they also, like, some of them that are on the list now barely do legal aid work anymore because they're sort of drifting towards civil work. And then you've got more people who are coming into criminal work and so are starting to do. So we have a good we have a good sort of back and forth. They're not exclusively doing, one perp after the other. And like, they're just literally coming up to the desk and like, oh, who's my next? Who's my next? It's, we have good attorneys that don't automatically say to people, oh, take a plea deal, because obviously in this country we don't practice that effective thing of like charging, throwing the book at every perp that walks through the door and then negotiating it down to getting you to admit to something, even if you're innocent, which a lot of people do because they're so terrified of the system and the risk of like, oh, if they somehow can find a way of, because we all know that the amount of people banged up in the United States of America that are completely innocent is unforgivable. It's a huge amount. It's a huge percentage compared to almost every other country in the world, simply because of that system. And so I think I would hate to see anything even close to that coming here. I think ours works. Ours works. It's good. Yeah, we got, we're close to getting something right. And I would say that we're probably doing better in Cayman in terms of looking after people through, especially on the criminal side. We are not so much on the civil, as I say. We need to do some work over on that side, but on the criminal side, we're doing good. We're giving our people a fighting chance if they're innocent.
Yes. And just as we're going to wrap up the first segment here in a little bit, you can contact the Legal Aid Office. My experience has always been that they're very, very
they're great. Yeah,
offer assistance. You can even go in and sit down and meet with them, and they'll assist you as much as possible, because you've got to ensure that your paperwork is accurate. It's done properly. But I put their email address, and we have various contact numbers that you can reach out to them. And they're very good with responding and getting back to you in email as well. So
yeah, it's a great service, actually. They're pretty good down there. Really good.
Yeah. So the other thing is, not only do you have to ensure that your application form is completed, so if you have any questions, by all means, reach out to them. But it is also an offense. Make sure that you tell the truth on your application form.
Yeah. Right? You can be in double shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Tell the truth, people. Tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you prepare it to the best of your ability. And if you
don't be afraid of it. I think it's important to stress that people don't be afraid to make these applications. The money's there. You're entitled to it. If you're facing a criminal charge and you did not do it, you absolutely. Now, if you did it, you still may need a good lawyer, because if you did it, you might be able to admit on, you yourself could say all the wrong things. Because I've seen this happen. I mean, there was somebody recently who just got charged with something, came to grand court for the first time, just stood in the dock and said, yeah, I did it, without any assistance from anybody. And the thing is, you might have done it, but you might not have done it as badly as they're telling you that you did it.
Right. Yeah.
And, the law has degrees. It's nuanced. And so you could maybe have brought your sentence down by getting a lawyer to take a look at those charges, because they could have maybe negotiating them down a little bit for you. And so if you're willing to plead to something, as we have in this country, they have, they don't really call it plea bargaining, but you have like an agreement of the conditions of the plea, right? And that's written down and it becomes an official document. So, and that can change how much time you serve in the big house. So it's important. So fill in the legal aid forms. Don't be afraid of them.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And like we said earlier, there's certain nuances that might be occurring with a particular case. Sometimes you can get things dropped even, you might have done it. But when the attorneys start speaking with the DPP's office, they say, well, you don't have the full picture of what transpired. Here's some additional circumstances of what happened. They might say, wow, even in terms of public interest, this is not worth pursuing. Yeah. Right. So,
we see that all the time. That's something you, Sandra, must have seen it. I've seen it dozens and dozens of times. Like a case starts off with, especially theft. Like they start off with 32,000 counts against the person and $1 million. And then it ends up as 10 counts, $1,000. Because the paperwork and stuff and the first, the first view of it, as far as investigators are concerned, they're throwing the book at you as the most that they can get. And then obviously, it turns, so you should always, even if you're like, okay, yeah, I did steal some money. Well, tell your attorney exactly what happened. And so fill in the legal aid forms, and then they will navigate that whole scenario for you. You're not a lawyer, you don't know. Absolutely. You don't want to go to jail. If you can get out of, nobody should go to jail unless they really have done something bad. So make sure you've done something bad before you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not encouraging you to do something
No.
to make it worthwhile, but I'm just saying,
Yes.
don't be letting yourself go to jail when you've not done it, when you've only done a little bad thing, not a big bad thing.
If you're giving up your freedom, then it has to warrant that for sure.
Yes, exactly.
And we need to talk about duty counsel. Maybe we'll just wrap up after
this.
Yeah,
it's kind of a separate issue, to be honest, isn't it? Because it's about it's an automatic thing. You don't, although the money comes from legal aid, it's actually you don't have to fill anything in for that.
Let's explain how this works, right? So you show up to court, and we see this happening all the time. The judges, even in summary court, will say, "Hey, you are entitled." This is maybe your first mention before you make a plea, right? Because the prosecution comes, they might have the files ready, and the judge will say, or the magistrate will say, before you make any sort of decision, you are entitled to duty
counsel.
And this is your first help is what duty counsel is all about.
First go, But that's usually at the police station. The duty counsel's at the police station. That's at the point of arrest and charge.
Sometimes
then in court, if they don't have a lawyer, if somebody turns up at court without a lawyer, because maybe they didn't get duty counsel in the jail, or they did, but they still didn't get a lawyer afterwards, then you get one more go, you can ask questions. And that's why it's really important to do that, because then that attorney can also help you with the legal aid as well. But I would recommend that anybody, but if once you've had duty counsel at the police station, stick with that person to get your legal aid sorted, because you can always jump legal aid certificates if it's not working, because they can transfer. Once the legal aid certificate is granted, the lawyers can transfer it amongst each other. We've seen that happen because lawyers get into difficulty for all sorts of reasons, not least because they might be they might have defended another perp who's involved in the case or something. So or you might have lied to them, and if you lie to them, then they have to go if they know you've lied to them. That's the thing. Don't never lie to your lawyer, because if you lie to them, then they have to leave. And also, if you tell a lawyer that you've done it, he has to advise you to plead guilty, and if you won't, he can't help you. She can't help you.
He or she,
So people know that before you speak to a lawyer. Bear that in mind. If you lie to them, they have to dump you. If you tell them that you're guilty and then ask them to help you be not guilty, they have to dump you.
Right. So just to clarify, the duty counsel role is an early stage advice only.
Absolutely,
and if you want ongoing representation after that, like for the whole case, then you would need to fill out the legal aid application or get a private retainer for that to continue.
Yes, exactly.
And
everybody's every single person who gets arrested, even if it's minor, you're entitled to a lawyer at that moment. At the moment of arrest, you are entitled to it. You don't have to say anything to the police until a lawyer comes in the room.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things that the lawyers will obviously want to talk to you about is your right to remain silent, because you still have that right, although it's a little bit, it comes with some caveats these days. We changed the law a number of years ago, but you still have the right to remain silent. And so you don't have to rush into any interviews or plea agreements or anything like that could have some really, really serious implications.
So the things that you say very, very much at the beginning can come back to haunt you. And so that practice that often lawyers will often tell you to stay quiet, but now to get around the Miranda situation whereby it can be used against you, they now usually advise you to give a short statement that would address anything that you'd rely on later. And that's why they do that short statement now.
Right. All right. Well, we are out of time for this week's segment of Court Matters. Yep. So for next week's episode, we'll do a part 2, a continuation on legal aid. We had reached out to the legal aid director, and I think she was waiting on sort of a formal response, whether or not she could be interviewed as part of a segment. And she did get back to me and said that the court's office is kind of launching a public awareness campaign, and her office would be part of that. But like I said, they're very, very open to answering individual questions. So if you're an individual who are in need of legal aid, or you have some questions about your application or how the process works, by all means, reach out to the Legal Aid office. Their email address is legalaid@judicial.ky. And then there's about 4 phone numbers that you can reach them on, because it's a proper office with a director and, additional support staff. So yeah, reach out to them. And the director of Legal Aid, her name is Miss Stacy Park. And like I said, they're all super helpful in that office. So join us next week. Our episode airs every Monday at 8 p.m. Court Matters. We talk about all sorts of things, but for today's episode and for next week's episode, legal aid is the discussion. Wendy, thank you so much. This has been
welcome, Sandra.
And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, hopefully I shall be here too.
Awesome.
See you later.
All right, guys.